Hi folks, welcome to CRC Business Planning Online here on Westlink. I'm Andrew Huffer, and today we've got episode 10 coming your way. We're going to bring it all together. That's right, we're going to help you to bring every component of your business plan together so you can complete the business planning template and have a very well documented and focused future for your CRC. So today I'm being joined by Ros Worth from the Department of Regional Development. Great to see you here again, Ros.
Thank you, Andrew. Glad to be here.
And the wonderful John Denton. John, great to have you on board.
Thank you for those kind words, Andrew.
It's as kind as it's going to be for the day, but you know, I've tried my best. So, in terms of today, what we're going to take you through is going to give you the opportunity to review and update your business plan. So we'll be doing a quick recap of the core components of each part of your business plan. We'll also be looking at giving you the opportunity to have that completed and also have strategies in place so that you can actually measure the outcomes delivered by the plan. That just takes us a bit into last week's episode. So if we just recap on that quickly before we move into the main game of today. So last week, we worked with you to give you a better understanding of the value of developing success measures. We also helped you identify what should be measured and how you should go about it. And importantly, we talked about how that information can be used and communicated to make sure that your CRC is sustainable in the long term. So some of the critical things that come out of that episode that I think you need to take forward into today. So we're going to start off by really thinking about why do the business plan? What's the value of it? And John, if I can hand over to you for the first rant of today to take us through what is the critical importance of this business plan.
Absolutely, Andrew. Why have a business plan? If you remember back in episode 1, we went through a little quote from Alice in Wonderland, which is one of my favourite quotes, which explains exactly why you need a business plan. So we're going to redo that little episode now. So Alice, would you like to start?
Cheshire Cat, would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?
Well, Alice, that depends a good deal on where you want to go.
I don't much care where,
Then it doesn't matter which direction you're going.
so long as I go somewhere.
Or you're bound to get somewhere if you just keep walking long enough. It's just a simple little quote, but it highlights what happens if you don't have a plan and a direction and know where you're going. Then it doesn't really matter what you do. And it's the same in business. I get so frustrated when I go and see business owners for the first time because they want help to grow their business and maybe exit their business down the track. And I say to them, well, show me the business plan that you're working to. And they sort of look at me as though I've come up with something amazing. It's what business plan? So these guys are busy doing all the walking like Alice was, but have got no idea where they're aiming to get to or what outcomes they're after.
They could find themselves in a foreign land, John.
Exactly.
A foreign land of pain is my guess, especially if you're hassling it.
It's that old adage, you know, if you fail to plan, then you're actually planning to fail. So regardless of whether you need a plan for funding and sponsors and things like that, just good business practice means having a good plan. And so let's have a look at some of the core reasons why you should have a business plan. The first thing I just explained is to get clarity and direction. So know where it is you're going, know where you're trying to get to and what outcomes you're trying to achieve, and really crystallize your thinking so that the whole board are united in a common direction and have absolute clarity on where you're going. Another reason for having a good business plan is that it gives everybody confidence and motivation to go out and work that plan and to achieve. So, you know, if people are not quite sure where the business is going and what's happening, then they become less motivated, they're not confident in what they do.
And I think it also gives confidence externally to people who are funding the business plan. And you give an example of businesses, but also to CRCs, if you've got DRDs funders or if you've got other external funders, if they see a business plan in place, it's going to give a lot of confidence. And from a business perspective, if a bank sees a business plan in place, and they can see some evidence of maybe, gee, you've even followed it, then there's going to be some confidence there. Otherwise, I think you're going to be asking some pretty big favours in.
It gives a
Absolutely.
solid foundation, not just little stepping stones that might still fill in the gaps, but then there's cracks. So it's important to have that very solid page about where you're going
Yeah,
and how you're going to
absolutely.
get there.
So another good reason is you need to make sure you've got the right skills and resources in the CRC or in your business. And without a plan and knowing what it is you're trying to achieve and having some goals, then you can't work out what resources you need.
Yep, and we got a great example from Lee Steele from last week when she talked about how they've gone quite heavily into a commercial printing sort of side of things as a fundraiser for their business now. So I'm sure that come out of their business planning process is that we're going to need the right resources to be able to meet the demand properly for that.
Yeah. So how are you going to resource your plan?
Yep.
And then, of course, as I keep saying, if you can't measure it, then how can you improve it? And we looked at some really good reasons. You need to have some really good reasons of how you're going to celebrate your success. And really, it's an opportunity for PR and motivation, and again, to give feedback to sponsors and joint venture partners and funders on how you're going.
And I think often CRCs are so busy doing that they overlook that. And as soon as they finish one project, they commence, often they overlap with another project. So it's very important to take that time out to celebrate as a team and with your community, your successes.
Yeah, we talked about that quite a lot of detail in episode 9. So the starting point for your business plan, and this is where we brought the jelly beans into it, and we've still got the jelly beans.
You haven't eaten that one,
Haven't
I'm
eaten.
impressed.
No, but I've made sure that it's mine. It's to start with the green jelly bean. So this is where you come up with the ideas, to get the board and the volunteers together and put your mission statement in place.
Actually, I thought the green jelly bean being big, hairy, audacious might be Andrew's.
So have some big, hairy, audacious goals for the CRC, for the organisation, and write up your mission. Your mission is really your raison d'etre. It's why you exist. Reason for being, Andrew.
Oh, thank you.
It's all right. So why does the CRC exist? And we have an example here from one of the CRCs to support the economic and social development of the community. That's a pretty good, bold statement. And then it says how they're going to do that: by improving information access and delivering a range of training and offer services at an affordable price. So it's nice and succinct. It says what they're going to do in broad terms, big picture terms, and how they're going to go about doing it. So your mission becomes your guiding star. It's what you're striving for.
You betcha. Because too often I see it's a fluffy thing that people do in a workshop someday, and then it just gets left in a book somewhere, and that's it, and it's never really revisited. Whereas I think it's a great opportunity to bring people into an organisation as, say, part of the induction process to say, here's what we're about. Are you on board with this? If you are, we welcome you in. If you're not, maybe we need to rethink things here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it needs to be communicated continuously, and people, the volunteers and the people involved with the CRC need to know what it is. So once you've got the big picture done, then you need to start breaking things down into objectives. And Andrew, I believe you're an expert on objectives that suck, is that right?
Yes, that's right. It's pronounced objectives that suck.
Suck.
You've got to get that pronunciation right. And this is another one of my rants, and I'm on a rant mode today, is that too often, not only do we see mission statements that aren't used, we also get objectives that suck. And these are ones that are just fluffy, don't have any real purpose to them, pretty broad, and John, can't be measured. One of the cardinal sins.
If it can't be measured, it can't be improved.
No, it's not real. It doesn't exist. So my encouragement is always to have objectives that are SMART objectives. So it's specific, measurable, action-focused, realistic and tangible. And we've got an example here. CRC services are utilised by at least 60% of local businesses by 2016. So you can see here that's quite specific. We're talking about CRC services. We can measure that in a number of ways. We've got some actions about that in terms of getting the local community and business community understanding what services we offer. And we reckon it's realistic. We reckon we can probably get 60% of local businesses involved in utilising the CRC. So to me, that's a really good, smart objective that could deliver a lot of value for the CRC as well as its clients.
Absolutely, and it's measurable.
It's measurable. Yes.
Yeah. So you're happy. This is good.
Mm.
Let's move on and talk about making sure that your objectives do meet the needs of your clients, thinking about the market segments. And in our earlier episodes, we talked about some of the market segments, and the example was using a local cafe. So you might have your tradies that come in to grab something and go. You might have your mums that want to come in and have some coffee and catch up with some friends. You might have some local visitors looking for catering. And you could also have tourists coming in for a snack. That tourist looks a bit like John Denton, I reckon. I've seen you dressed like that before, I'm sure.
Yeah, but I don't
No.
smoke.
Yeah.
Sure you don't.
And that was with the grass skirt with the lace.
Indeed. So thinking about from a CRC's perspective, enough of my bad jokes, it's really important to be quite clear on what your market segments are and what's the product service that they're requiring from you and which one of those can you match the best. So we've got a range of examples here that connect up with that. So I think it's really important to put a lot of thinking into that and also make sure that you've done some work to understand what they are. So some thoughts on how people can understand what your community is looking for in terms of products and services.
I guess it's about understanding the demographics of your community to be sure that you're developing programs, activities, resources that are aligned to your real community, not just your perception of the community or the strengths of your CRC. So I guess doing a sort of a situational community analysis. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we touched on earlier, be sure that the clientele who are walking through your door is a representation of your community, not just because of whatever services you provide, is pretty much scoping that.
So there could be a smoking gun out there, a group that really needs your services that you haven't kind of found out about yet.
Yeah.
It's if we were to use a jelly bean for this, we would use a white jelly bean, which signifies facts and data.
Yep.
So when you're doing a community analysis, or in a business you're doing a market analysis to work out who your niche market is, then you need to collect all the facts and data and try to avoid making assumptions.
So some of that information could be things like population demographics, regional, what's happening across the region, what's happening with economic development, what's happening, are the tourism numbers going up? So all the things along that sign there, the where, the what, the when, what's happening right across your part of the world. And importantly, there's probably some things right at your fingertips in terms of how you could collect them, I'd imagine. In fact, I know for a fact that there's a host of simple things you can just go and find without even having to pay for to get this information.
Absolutely right. The Australian Bureau of Statistics is always a good starting point because they provide census data free of charge. It is very statistical and lots of data, so you need to be a bit analytical to really get to the bottom of it. But for instance, when I looked at some of the census data for one of the CRCs I worked with recently, it was interesting that one of the demographics that came out of it, or two demographics actually, was around age. You know, the majority of there were two bubbles in the age group in the region, and that was the 20 to 30 year olds and then the 55 to 65 year olds. So that sort of gives you an indication of where to focus some of your services.
Yep. And to me, it shows how important it is to test your assumptions. To really say, well, this is my perception of the community, but what are the facts that you've just pointed out there?
Yeah, the white jelly bean, stick to the facts, known facts, not assumed facts.
You know, looking at partnerships, I mean, one of the bullet points we had earlier was about local groups. So, you know, it's about looking at how you can strengthen and work with other community organisations that also look after your community or region.
Yep,
Yeah.
cool.
If you cannot do it alone, you know, how you can strengthen
Partner up.
and partner up to still deliver a service in your region.
Sure.
Yeah.
And another good website to go to for information is it's called ID the Population Experts, and you can see the URL there. They actually take the census data from ABS and analyse it and draw conclusions from it. So they present it in a more readable and understandable way. It's just that you have to pay for that service. So nothing comes for free from them. Local shires are a great source of information as well, and industry groups, chambers of commerce and so on. or you could run your own survey. SurveyMonkey is a great website for running quick and simple surveys and collect your own data. So lots of ways, Andrea.
Plenty of opportunities there, I reckon, and I think that's a really good way to probably take the next step in the business planning process in terms of thinking about the situational analysis and starting to look at your own CRC and perhaps how it can meet some of those needs. John, I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Yes, well, we get to eat some more jelly beans now.
Fantastic.
So we're at the bottom of page 2 on the business planning template, by the way, and it's called a SWOT analysis. The first thing to look at, and do this with your board and your volunteers, are what are the strengths of the organisation. And this is where the yellow jelly bean comes into play, because yellow is like the sun. It's warm, it gives growth, and it develops the ideas that you had when you put your mission statement together. So look at your mission statement, look at the things and ideas that can come out of that, and think about what are the strengths of your CRC. I mean, one of the ones that generally comes up is that the CRCs are part of a network, and you can draw on the experience and what other CRCs have done and learn from them. Any other comments on strengths from Andrew or Roz?
I think one of the strengths I see in a lot of CRCs is the strength of local knowledge. They've often got people who've been around, they know the people around their community, and they've got good connections back out of their community. I think that's a real strength for them. And balancing that off in bringing some new young talent, people who can do techno stuff and things like that. I've seen that in quite a few CRCs. It's just great combination.
They're incredibly committed to their communities, and they make the impossible possible.
Totally.
So it could be skill sets, it can be all sorts of things, but generally people can come up with lots of strengths. The other yellow jelly bean to look at is opportunities. So what are some of the opportunities that the CRC can pursue? What are some of the gaps around the community that aren't being provided by businesses? So what are some of the holes that the CRC can fill? The thing about strengths and opportunities is that they are current. You're generally talking about the present. This is how things are now. Opportunities obviously can be future as well. But when we go on to look at the dark side, the black jelly beans, then it's my favourite one, by the way, the black jelly bean, not the weaknesses.
There's one left.
Then you start to look at what are some of the weaknesses in the CRC, and again, that could be a lack of skill set maybe, or just a lack of resources, a lack of people. There are all kinds of things that CRCs come up with. And then the other area to look at is threats. So this makes up the completion of the SWOT. And think of threats and trends. So a trend like the change in technology can be a threat, but it can also be an opportunity. So quite often a CRC will turn a threat into an opportunity. Now you've just got to be a little bit careful. So a word of warning about the threats and the weaknesses is, I say it's a bit like red wine. You need to treat it with respect and don't go overboard, all right? Because it's designed to obviously make you realistic in your planning, but you don't want to overdo it.
Yeah, it's important to keep that balance, isn't it, so that you are walking in an upright position.
Well, that's very good, Roz. I like that. I'm going to use that in future now.
Yeah.
So that's at the bottom of page 2 in the template, and obviously something that you'll do with the board and any volunteers who want to get involved. So once we'd completed the SWOT analysis, then we started to brainstorm ideas and come up with some projects and goals that the CRC want to achieve. And we explained how to do that through a brainstorming technique, which you can see in this diagram here. So put down some major items around the central topic, and then here we had promoting the CRC or marketing the CRC as an example main topic, and then off that you'll find that people will come up with all sorts of ideas about how you can do that. So the great thing about mind mapping is because it's very visual, And because you're looking at a lot of things at the same time, it stimulates a lot of ideas around the group. You know, so people really start to come up with things that you wouldn't otherwise have thought of. And then turn those, like for marketing the CRC, the ideas and actions that came up from that, put them all on post-it notes. So we've now had jelly beans and post-it notes.
Yeah.
We've got
And-
shares
and-
in both of them, by the way,
Yes,
just
yeah.
full disclosure.
And the flip chart.
And the
Look,
flip chart, yes, we
yeah.
used a flip chart in the episode where we covered this off. Because the next stage is once you've got a whole lot of actions and objectives to achieve in marketing the CRC, then you need to start prioritising them. So then we went on to write up, in fact, all the ideas and projects that we came up with the CRC for.
Yep.
This was our example CRC, and we put it all onto post-it notes. And what you'll find is that when you do this exercise, you'll end up with far more projects and ideas that you can probably realistically do. So now it's a case of prioritising which ones you're going to work on. And this was done, again, on the flip chart, using the capacity impact prioritisation grid. So you look at the projects and you put them on the grid according to the CRC's capacity to do them and what kind of impact they're going to have on the outcomes and the benefits to the community. So by using that grid and moving the post-it notes around, then you can come up with your top projects.
You know what I reckon would be a great innovation?
What's that?
Jelly bean post-it notes.
Ah,
That'd be cool. We need to have all bases covered.
hey, you could even use post-it notes the same colour as the jelly beans.
You're onto it.
Yeah.
That's a halfway
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
I'll work with that.
Okay.
In fact, if a CRC out there could provide them for me, good market. Just saying. Just
Yep.
saying.
Captive
Okay.
client.
So now we've got that. So Andrew, take us through the next stage of how we connect those projects to the DRD outcomes.
Sure. So after my wonderful innovation there, let's get back to being serious for a little while. We said how important it was to be able to really show that you're delivering value for your funder. And in this case, it's really making sure that you're able to prove that your projects are going to deliver on the DRD outcomes. So in this case, we gave a few examples of the 5 DRD outcomes and the projects that are making a high contribution to those. So from the brainstorm list that John put up there just before, we could see that community events and the website upgrade were going to be high contributors to about 3 of the DRD outcomes there, plus a couple more as well in terms of increasing the profile of the CRC. So it really made it quite clear that you've got a strong alignment between that project you're putting up and the funder's outcomes. And that final one about financial software, it doesn't actually deliver on all the DRD outcomes, but it's a critical one in terms of maintaining the high standards of management and governance. So we're not saying that each project has to deliver on all outcomes, but we're saying be really clear in which ones it does have a high degree of contribution to.
And I think Lee mentioned in an earlier episode, like the project that they came up for a particular purpose actually indirectly covered a number of outcomes.
Yep.
Mm.
So then we move now to the pointy end of the business planning process, and that's actually looking at the action planning component. So we went through some examples with Lee from the Pingelly CRC, and we'll take you through a couple of those in a minute. But importantly, the action plan is critical in being that connector. So it helps connect the actions that obviously need to be implemented, the time frame that's going to occur, and John, I believe ongoing is still not a time frame.
No.
No, ongoing is not very measurable, Andrew.
Thank
No.
you. Just
So-
checking. Just wanted to see if that had changed. The action plan also connects the budget needed to do it, so you need to have that quite clear. And Lee made it really clear in a previous episode that don't underestimate that. Make sure you actually go through and identify what's going to be needed. The action plan also connects your grants to the FAA, the Financial Assistance Agreement, and also to probably one of the more critical ones, the people who are going to actually make it happen. Who's going to put their hand up and be responsible to saying, I'm going to make sure that this happens, I'll be accountable. It's one of my favourite words, it's accountable. It's great. So, action planning. Any other thoughts on the importance of action planning and how it connects into the business plan?
I think action planning is really important because you know where you are at any stage, and whilst you think you might deliver, the community fair in September, if you haven't achieved X, Y, Z by maybe April, May, the likelihood of you being able to schedule that in September is minimal. So, and that gives you a bit of a heads up, so you know that, all hands on deck are now required to be able to ensure that we return to what our time frame would be within the action plan to ensure that you meet your advertising, your commitments.
Yep.
And of course your funding body,
Absolutely.
most importantly.
So you're really clear on what the lead-in time is, what all the tasks are in that lead-in time, who's going to do it, how it's going to happen.
If I can just make a comment on that, because I've just been through this exercise with a client, and it's always easier when you're working on these timelines and fundings to start at the end and work to the now. So you start as though, and again, use post-it notes. We've got shares in post-it notes. But get a whiteboard or a big chart and write up on there the end point. So this is the goal achieved.
Yep.
And then draw a timeline along it. And then starting at the goal achieved, work back with your post-it notes on what has to happen immediately before that and what has to happen immediately before that. And you'll find that it really generates a lot of thought and good planning, and you end up with a lot of post-it notes all along the timeline, depending on, how long before the end does this have to happen, how long does this, and what happens that way is that you get a much more realistic time frame, and you get a much better idea of the incidental expenses and the hidden costs that you may come up with as well.
Yep.
It's just a great way of planning projects and being realistic about it.
And I think often there's lots of little activities that spin off from one particular activity. So it might be charted as, you'll look after the registrations for this event, full stop. But actually looking after the registration means, confirming place, accepting money, identifying any dietary requirements or additional needs, parking, sort of electronic requirements, all those sort of peripherals are sort of part of that. And so while someone might say, you look after registration, sounds easy, there's actually a lot involved in each of those little components. So in having a timeline, it helps you for maybe other projects that might be similar, or when you repeat that, you can ensure that something you maybe overlooked in your first running of that project, activity, event can be addressed next time around. And it just makes it really stress-free and easy for everybody at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And once you start involving people in something, it's going to get entertaining. Just by the way, that method you mentioned, John, it's called backcasting. So if you Google the word backcasting.
Backcasting.
Yep.
Okay.
That's the official, I think you've trademarked it, I believe. So
Well,
backcasting by John Denton. So,
I will now.
yeah. But great method, and I think it's a really good way to get your planning in place.
And it's probably, I think also as part of that action planning timeline is to actually write your promotional articles prior to the conclusion of the event, just a skeleton, and then fill in people's names, faces, photos, etc. Because often everyone's so exhausted after delivering a major success or however you want to define the particular event, there ends up being a bit of a gap, and then think, it's too late to do that now. So if you've already got your template drafted, it's a really easy thing to backfill, essentially, those important names, photos, places.
Great tip, Ros. That's really useful, thanks. John, you mentioned the word people before. I think it's worth now chatting a bit about the people influence in the CRC and what's some of the planning you could do around it.
Sure, Andrew. On page 9 of the business plan template, it talks about the personnel plan. The importance of having a personnel plan is for you to be able to do a skills analysis of the people involved with the CRC and know what skills, be able to cross-train for skills so that you can cover for people when people are off sick or can't come in, to know what additional skills you're going to need to train up on to accomplish some of your projects. And then it goes on to thinking about how you're going to cover your risks. So again, the personnel plan is a key part of that. And in the episode where we covered risk management, we looked at rating risks within the CRC on a high, medium or low level based on the likelihood of it going to happen and the impact that it would have on the CRC's business. So, Ros, any thoughts on personnel planning and risk management?
I think it's really important for any business, particularly CRCs, to have a sort of succession plan and a risk management plan in place for any kind of unforeseen variables that occur which impact directly on the service of on the delivery of their services. Lee addressed that specifically for what sort of actions they've put in place with their CRC. But I think it's important, like you mentioned, your funding, if it's more than 15% from one particular source, and I've kind of transferred that back to a CRC. If your CRC is perhaps relying on a great contribution from a particular individual, be that person the coordinator or someone on the management committee or a volunteer, obviously that's a real risk when something may happen to that person's ability to be able to continue to contribute at that level, and then if they have to withdraw for whatever reasons, that is a real risk for the delivery of services.
Absolutely. I have a saying in business that the most dangerous number in business is one. One of anything.
Yep.
One source of income, one key person in the business that's got all the expertise or knowledge, one key client as well. So when you do your risk management, have a look at those kind of things. If this went away, then what would be the impact? And Lee gave us a great acronym as well for risk management, which was PEST.
PEST.
She said, look at the political risks. So, and that can be federal, it could be state, or it could be local government. What are some of the political risks that could impact the CRC? E was for environment. So what are some of the environmental issues and challenges that could come up? S was for social. So again, what's happening in the local community and society that could be a risk. And technology was the last one. And that can be, technology can, as we know, work both ways, be a risk. Or it can be an opportunity. So any more thoughts on any of those?
Well, from the CRC perspective, technology's been a classic one over the last probably 3 to 5 years in terms of originally CRCs, I guess, were supplying a lot of technology for local people and business, and now a lot of people have gone to having their own internet, computer, all that sort of stuff. But there's still some opportunities there in helping people to introduce them into their own business and showing them how to use it.
Yeah, well, that's a great one. The training. A lot of people get smartphones, Andrew, and don't know how to use them.
What are they?
So look at your personnel within the organisation and the skills that they've got and what they bring to the organisation, and then look at those risks, and use the matrix in the business plan to rate them as high, medium or low. And obviously the ones that come out both in high in terms of likelihood and impact are the ones that you need to address in your planning first. And the other one which gets overlooked, I think, in just about every not-for-profit organisation I know, and many businesses as well, is succession planning. You end up with a key person like a coordinator or board member, and then there's no consideration or planning given to what happens when they go. And then the whole organisation's vulnerable, and Lee came up with a very interesting solution to that. And that was to employ temporary part-time staff rather than be reliant on a single individual. So,
and they all had different areas that they specialised in within the broader portfolio of CRC.
Yeah, and then with cross-training and cross-skilling, you can cover. If one person's off, it's not going to be it's not going to be a showstopper.
Yeah. And I think you said an important word there. It's when they go,
Only
if
one?
they go. Sorry. One of the many important words you said
Thank
was
you.
when they go, because it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it's a way of reducing burnout as well with a particular individual. If a person is responsible for delivering all those things,
Yeah.
even though they're committed and fantastic, there's only so much a single person can do for so long.
Just the other
That's a
thing,
very good
just
point,
on succession plan and its value to an organisation, I think it's good for staff within the organisation to see the opportunities it provides them. Because they could be thinking, John Denton, he's going to be here forever. It's going to crush me. So they could be thinking, right, here's some opportunities for me to build up and get to that level down the track, because I know that they're not going to be around forever. Or they're going to be looking to do different things themselves in the organisation, so I can build my skills and work in an area I want to work in. So I think there's the opportunity there as well.
Absolutely, it shows a career path, if you like, or a progression path.
Yep.
So getting the people and the risk part of it considered and planned for to mitigate those risks is a key part of any business and CRC operation. Then in the next episode, we went on to measuring success and why do it. We came up with some pretty standard sort of why to measure your success, and that was to provide evidence to funders, sponsors, the community, stakeholders of how the CRC is operating. And it's a motivator for staff because, again, staff like to see outcomes, they like to get a pat on the back and a thank you, and that's something that often gets overlooked both in business and not-for-profits, is thanking people and rewarding them for the results that they've achieved. It highlights to your target market, to say your stakeholders, the value that you're providing so that you become the one-stop shop, you become the go-to place in your community, and then word of mouth takes over. And of course it enables you to identify any gaps in where you're not actually coming up to speed on things, or projects that are slipping, things that are slightly coming off the rails. And if you do that review on a regular basis and that measurement on a regular basis and consistently, then you can quickly pick up any things that are going off track before that becomes a disaster. You know? So anything that Ros or Andrew would like to add on that?
I think it's always important to address something that might be a cause of concern early. Don't be afraid to seek the help of the regional coordinator or the department or other associated agencies, because any little sleeping shadows soon grab flesh and off they go, grow into something very big, and all of a sudden you think,
You
oh my
get
goodness,
a project
what am I going
zombie
to do?
wandering
That's
around,
right, yes.
ready to devour people.
Yes, yes. So,
I think the other thing for me, John, is that measuring success is actually a risk management process on its own, because it actually helps you identify what some of the dramas could be coming up and make sure that you've got a very robust business because you're being able to demonstrate your success. So to me, it's a risk management tool all of its own.
Yeah, it's the sustainability thing, so that you can make sure you've got sustainability in the organisation for the longer term, and becoming self-sufficient.
and it makes everything you do meaningful. I mean, you mentioned motivating staff, but they leave work every day with a real purpose of what their actions have been able to achieve or contribute to for the betterment of their community.
So what do you do with the information? Well, have regular staff meetings to give feedback to the staff, pat them on the back, reward them, recognise them, and keep them from burning out. That was a key point, Ros. Thank you for that. And of course, you can use the information to promote through local media, websites, social media, get the message out there how well the organisation's doing, get some free PR. And of course, connect to the 5 DRD outcomes. That's a must. And the continuous improvement process that we talked about last time. So as Andrew was saying, through the review process, you can make sure that the organisation, that the CRC is on track for long-term sustainability. So we've pretty well covered everything that we covered in the previous 9 episodes. So Andrew, would you like to wrap it up for us?
I would like to take your wise words on board, John, because I think this is all about keeping on track. And I reckon the business plan is all about keeping yourself on track and keeping your CRC on track. So we'd certainly encourage you to really have that mantra in mind, that this is about keeping us on track from here and keeping our CRC on track and hopefully keeping our community that we're servicing on track as well. So that to me is my big take-home message from here. I think there's a lot of components that you can tie into your business plan now, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about how business plans are coming out from the CRC's, Ros, and I'm looking forward to hearing about that from you. I've really enjoyed working with you guys. I'll even admit that to you, John.
Thank you, Andrew. Yes,
So,
I've got to admit it's been fun, and hopefully we've provided some good information and processes for people.
So thanks, Ros, for your wonderful part in making this a reality.
I think the three of us, me, myself and I, have really enjoyed being here.
Thanks to Lee Steele from the Pingelly CRC as well, a wonderful role you've played, Lee. And a little thanks to, there's a couple of strange men on the other side of the set we'd like to say a big thanks to.
Strange is the real operative
Yes, the
word
Black
there.
Jelly Bean Bandits. Steve and Bob, thanks for your wonderful work throughout the program. It's just been a fantastic opportunity to be involved, and we're looking forward to seeing more of the CRC people as soon as we can and hearing more about your wonderful business plans. Thanks, team. So it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye for me.
And goodbye from her.